Your AARP top tips for the best superfoods for your eyes. Want to keep your vision strong? Feast your eyes on these 10 nutritious and delicious foods. Tuna. It's filled with omega-3 fatty acids, shown to reduce the risk of age-related macular degeneration. Blueberries. They're rich in anthocyanins. Those are the antioxidants that cross the barrier from your bloodstream into your eye tissue and protect vision. They also may help with normal tension glaucoma. Dark chocolate. Yes, you heard right. A recent study reported improved vision, at least temporarily, after eating a bar of dark chocolate, perhaps because of a boost in blood flow. Spinach. It's got two antioxidants, lutein and zeaxanthin, that go to a part of your eye called the macula, which helps shield the eye from damaging light. Those same two antioxidants are found in egg yolks, and the fat in eggs helps you absorb these eye-protecting substances. Eggs may help you fight macular degeneration with their vitamin D. Oysters. The key ingredient here is zinc. It can help with night vision and cataracts and helps vitamin A create melanin, a pigment that protects your eyes. Hot tea. Researchers found that hot tea drinkers are 74% less likely to develop glaucoma than those who don't. The study isn't conclusive, but we do know that tea is filled with disease-fighting antioxidants. Oranges. Maybe that's why they call it vitamin C. Like other antioxidants, vitamin C helps prevent eye damage and may reduce the risk of cataracts and macular degeneration. Sunflower seeds. They have vitamin E, which is yet another antioxidant. Sensing a theme here? A Spanish study found significantly lower rates of cataracts when taking this vitamin. Finally, carrots. They're filled with beta-carotene, which is altogether now an antioxidant. Your body changes it to vitamin A, which helps in the production of rod and cone cells in your eyes, so you can see better colors and see in low light. For more tips to stay healthy, visit aarp.org/health.
Welcome to the show! Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore!
Well, hello, everyone. Good evening. How are you all on this lovely May 27th? Oh, my gosh. You know, we've got such a great show for you tonight. So let's get some stuff rolling. So I want to welcome you all. I know we have folks who are watching here we've got a bunch of you watching on Facebook. We've got some on YouTube and probably a couple of you even tagging on Twitch. So today is kind of a really fun day of history. So, you know, back in 1894, just a few days ago, was when Dr. A.E. Douglas selected the site in Flagstaff for the Lowell Observatory. Now, it was basically named Lowell because of a wealthy Bostonian who decided to come and look at Mars. And so his name was Percival Lowell. And so they built the observatory, and that's when it was also, they discovered in the 30s, they discovered Pluto. Now, it's rumored that they chose the name because it was part of his initials of Percival Lowell. So I don't know if there's any truth to that, but I think it's also really cool that some of you may have just been watching the flower blood moon. Now, I know here in kind of central Phoenix, we actually had too much cloud cover to really see it. But if you take a look, and actually let me make that big so you can see that. So that bit over there on the right, that is from Fountain Hills. They actually turned the fountain on to take that photo probably around 5 o'clock in the morning. I didn't stay up quite that late because I noticed there were too many clouds, so I just kind of gave up. But I'm glad that we got that great shot from Fountain Hills. As well as it is National Salsa Month. So, you know, it's just coming to an end, so you still have time to make yourself some salsa. Grab yourself a knife, some tomatoes, all kinds of good stuff, hack it up, and throw it in a bowl. It is also National Cellophane Tape Day. I don't know quite why. I couldn't find any history on why would you want a National Cellophane Tape Day, but indeed there is. And it is also National Grape Popsicle. So time to get up those otter pops. And, and I think today we could have used some of those grape otter pops to just kind of calm our fiery weather down as it's starting to be summer. So what can you expect from tonight's show? Well, we always have a little bit of trivia. We've got some show and tell because I've got a house full of stuff and I've got lots of stories. So it's a great way to talk about some of the stuff in my house. We also have some music history, and it's actually a little on the sad side today. But we'll go into that, and it also kind of ties in the cocktail as well. We also have Little Arizona, where today we're going to be talking about Seligman up in northern Arizona on Old Route 66, as well as we have a cocktail and an amazing guest. Oh, we're going to have so much fun. Now, if this is your first time here, you might be wondering, who is that man and why is he on my screen? Well, my name is Marshall Shore. And I came to Arizona a little over 21 years ago. I was working in Brooklyn in a library. It was a beautiful Carnegie building with all that rich, deep wood. But I had had enough of the cold, the snow, the wind, the slush, the having to salt the sidewalk and everything. And so it was time for a move. So hello, Phoenix. And traded that library for a 1950 building that actually was the first branch library for the city of Phoenix. It was down in South Phoenix, and there was this rich oral tradition of the community. And that got me thinking, not a lot of people are really looking at kind of that modern history of where we are. They are in a really spiffy building right now that's really beautiful. Now, to get here, we had to load everything into a big orange cube, a U-Haul, and, they have their World International headquarters right here in the Valley of the Sun. And promptly moved into a beautiful 1956 ranch. Now, when we moved in, it was so many tones of beige. I am happy to say now it is just 2 tones of seafoam and cantaloupe. And pretty much the house is a time capsule, just the way I want it to be. Now, as soon as I got here, all I kept hearing about how there was no history here. But I knew that wasn't true because every time I would go somewhere, whether it was on foot, on my bike, in my car, I kept running across so many amazing people, places, and stories. And that really kind of got me thinking, we need to talk about all this stuff. And then there's that post-war boom that I think in a lot of ways helped form the Arizona that we all know and love, because all those GIs that either were stationed here, trained here, or passed on their way to somewhere else, they were moving here in huge numbers. And then also in the late 50s, you had this man, Dr. Carrier, who invented air conditioning. And so in the late 50s, it came to housing in Arizona. And so that way we were no longer sitting there sweating, but we could be cool as a cucumber while sitting in our houses. So I'm also called the hip historian. Now you might wonder, how does one get a name like the hip historian? Well, I do have a variety of events. In fact, actually just last night, we did over at the Care Cultural Center over in Scottsdale, they do a storytelling series every last Wednesday of the month. And so this was all about fast friends. And so that was a lot of fun. And we actually started talking about maybe when they are allowed to bring people as an audience, actually doing a happy hour from there with people, as well as having it also virtual at the same time. So look forward to trying to see what we can do with that. And I will definitely keep you all updated on that. And also, I just set up the end of September, going to be talking about history of Goodyear, actually with the city of Goodyear. So that's going to be a lot of fun, getting to explore that and talking about some of the little hidden gems, as well as next month is Pride Month. And so I'm already starting to talk to a couple organizations about doing LGBTQ history of Arizona for their staff, which I think will be a lot of fun as well. Now, also, if you would like to reach out, some of you I see have already found that there is a chat, as well as after the show. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, even good old-fashioned email. It all works because I love to hear from you. That's actually where some of the best things come from. All right, now if you're watching on Facebook, I will ask you to click on share so that way all of your friends can see how much fun we're having with Arizona history. So now we're going to go down a little path. So I mentioned I was from New York, but what I didn't mention is I was originally from a tiny little town in Indiana of about 25 people. We had 2 roads, 1 stop sign. And so, you know, I kind of have an affinity for those teeny tiny towns. So I'm actually in the process of working on a book called Little Arizona, focusing on small towns across Arizona. And so we're going to talk about Seligman, Arizona, which is up in Yavapai County, has a population of 776. And it was founded back in 1886. Now, originally, this community was the homeland of the Havasupai. And the town site was also on the Beal Wagon Road, as well as a stage stop on the Mojave Road. Now, originally it wasn't called Seligman, it was called Prescott Junction. And as the railroad came in, they decided to name it actually after one of the financiers who made the railroad happen and brought it. And it was a major stop off for staff. So they also had a Harvey House. Now, Havasu House was opened up in 1905. It closed in 1954, and in 2008 was dismantled and torn down. But you know, it wound up on the old National Trail, which then became Route 66, and it is the birthplace of historic Route 66. As Highway 40 went in, you had this man, Angel, and his brother realized that all their livelihood was going down Route 40 and not Route 66. So they actually were able to get it historic. And so that started kind of the whole revitalization of the entire Route 66. And so now, if you get on Route 66, well, I don't know if now, but pre-COVID, you would see busloads of world travelers. There would be all kinds of fun runs, different events happening on Route 66. And I think I've been reading that those are starting to get planned again. Look forward to when we can kind of cruise Route 66 as well. But it also kicks off almost 160 miles of usable Route 66, which I think is really cool. And so this was Angel's brother's restaurant. Now, when they grew up, this was actually a vacant, well, actually it wasn't a vacant lot because it had an outhouse on it. And the brothers noticed that every time somebody drove by, they would stop and use the facilities. And so they knew that if they built something there, people would still stop, and they do. You can still go visit the snow cap and get yourself a meal. Also, you have Seligman Sundries, which opened up in the 30s and closed in the early 70s. And it's chock block full of just advertising memorabilia from a wide variety of places. It's really kind of fascinating just to go in. They don't sell any of the memorabilia, but you can get coffee, shirts, all kinds of things like that. It is also famous for, of course, being a town on Route 66. There's a lot of neon. Even for a small town like this, there is still quite a bit of neon. Now, if anyone has ever seen the movie Cars and the town Radiator Springs, it was really fashioned right after Seligman, Arizona. So you can get a chance to see the un-Disneyfied version of that Route 66 history, as well as some amazing neon. So, it's a great place to go hang out. I love the sundries as a great way to just kind of see how artwork changed over the decades. And, it would not be a happy hour without a cocktail. And so let me bring on my bartender. And so today we are having, it is called Bouncing Chi-Chis. And you'll find out why it's called that. But what I love is PJ makes it really simple for me to make a cocktail. He puts all kinds of great ingredients. All I have to do is give it a little shake and a little pour. And there we go, a Bouncing Chi-Chi. All right, so you might be wondering, well, what is in a Bouncing Chi-Chi? And, I love PJ, because he's really getting good with the whole idea of just kind of storytelling. So it has a little bit of reposado tequila, a tequila liqueur, which is also an aphrodisiac, as well as a history of lover's gin. And of course, to make it Arizona, a little bit of prickly pear, there's some coconut, a little pineapple, some mango, some yuzu, and some hellfire shrub. And so here we have our Bouncing Chi-Chi. Nice and tropical. All right. So, through the miracle of modern technology, I'm really excited to say that we have a very special guest this evening who I'm really happy is here. And so let's bring on Margaret. Oops. There we go. And there we go. Hello.
Hello. Good evening.
How are you tonight?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Indeed. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, for those who don't know me, my day job is that of forest archaeologist for the Kaibab National Forest. And for those who are not familiar with the Kaibab National Forest, we manage 1.6 million acres, roughly on both sides of the Grand Canyon. My big joke is that
I didn't realize it was on both sides.
Oh yes, we manage both the Kaibab Plateau on the north rim, north of the north rim of the Grand Canyon, as well as the Tucson Ranger District south of the South Rim, and then the Williams District around Williams, Arizona. Speaking of another small town of Arizona. Yeah, I tend to joke that the Grand Canyon's the hole in the middle of my forest. Historically, we actually managed it before the Park Service took it over. So that's part of the reason why it was carved out of what was at that time two forests. The Tucson National Forest and the Kaibab National Forest were once two separate forests and were combined in the 30s. But yeah, so a little Forest Service history. But yeah, so I'm the forest archaeologist. That's my day job. I'm from California originally, and I've been on the Kaibab and in the Forest Service for roughly about 15 years. And what we're going to be talking about tonight is a little bit of Arizona Black history. And this is a subject that I kind of fell upon in a way. Here in Williams, I help manage a historic photo project that we have here where we are identifying historic photos and scanning them in. We have a very large database of photos and documents, maps of we have about over 4,000 images here. But as part of that, we started noticing that there were images of people of color, Black people here in Williams. And I got asked some years ago if I'd be interested in putting together a presentation on Black history of Arizona for an event at the Grand Canyon. And to be honest with you, I knew nothing I didn't know there was history. I just said yes and said I'd figure it out. And honestly, what I found was that there was a lot of Black history that people did not know about, and we were losing it. And there's been a long history, especially here in the timber forests of the northern Arizona, of black lumber. A lot of Black people here, and not as many now as there were, say, in the 40s, 50s, because a lot of folks have moved on to other economic opportunities. But there is a long history, and we're beginning to lose it. So my self-prescribed job is to help bring information and teach people about this history before we lose it, because I think it's a really important part of Western history.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. And so we're getting ready to do some trivia. Now, we do trivia a little uniquely here, so it is all multiple choice trivia. And the beautiful thing is that if you don't know the answer, it's already there, so you don't have to guess, but you might get it wrong. But then what's going to be really cool is when we're done, we'll take a little bit of an Arizona music history break, and then we'll go through and Margaret will talk about the answers and tell the story of those answers. So even if you get it wrong, you'll learn kind of about the story behind the answer. And so we are going to have so much fun tonight. And I love that we're kind of a little all over the place. I mean, we do a little across Arizona, which is great. So you can keep tabs of your answers. Some folks do it in the chat. Some folks do it on a pad and paper. I had one friend that did it like in a magic marker on his leg. You can do it however you want. No judgment here. It's all good. As long as we're playing along and having fun. That's what it's all about. All right. So our first question is, what year did people of African descent first land on or in North America? Was it A?
Probably should say on.
Yes, no, exactly. So was it A, 1550, B, 1492, C, 1600, or D, 1619? All right. So what year do you think people of African descent first landed here in North America? All right. Who was the first person of African descent ever recorded in the Southwest? A, Francisco Vasquez de Coronado. B, Fray Marcos de Niza. C, Cabeza de Vaca. Or D, Estevencio. All right. So who do you think was the first person of African descent ever recorded in the Southwest? All right. On to question 3. At what forts were the U.S. colored troops, or better known as the Buffalo Soldiers, first stationed in Arizona? Was it A, Fort Huachuca and Fort Apache, B, Fort Whipple and Fort Huachuca, C, Fort Verde and Fort Whipple, or D, Fort Apache and Fort Verde? So what were the forts where those Buffalo Soldiers were first stationed here in Arizona? All right, question 4. The moniker of Buffalo Soldier is believed to have been given to the USCT by which tribe? A, the Apache, B, the Comanche, C, Blackfeet, or D, Cheyenne? Which tribe is said to have bestowed that name of Buffalo Soldier? All right. Moving on to the midway point. Which came first in Arizona? Statehood or school segregation? So which came first? Statehood or segregation? In what year did the state of Arizona desegregate the school system? Was it A, 1956, B, 1952, C, 1954, or D, 1953? What year did Arizona desegregate the school system? All right, question 7. What spurred a major migration of African American laborers out of the South to northern Arizona starting in the 1920s? A, mining, B, lumber, C, farming, or D, cotton? So what spurred a major migration of African American laborers up into northern Arizona in the 20s? All right. Question 8. In what year was the famous Green Book, The Negro Travel Guide, first published by Victor Green? Was it A, 1940, B, 1932, C, 1936, or D, 1939? What year was the Green Book first published? All right. Coming into the home stretch. Which of the following was not, and I emphasize not, a predominantly Black community in Arizona? A, Mobile, B, Allenville, C, Randolph, or D, none of the above? So were any of those not predominantly Black communities in Arizona? All right. And who was the first Black mayor of Flagstaff, Arizona? A, Art Abbott, B, Matt Ryan, C, Carl Evans, or D, Lena Fowler? Who was the first Black mayor of Flagstaff? All right. While you're going through those, kind of getting your answers, I see Todd's already on the ball and getting some of his already squared away. So we're going to take a little bit of a music break. That's a little bit of a sad news. So this woman with this shocking red hair is Rusty Warren. Sadly, just a couple days ago, she passed away at the age of 91. Now, some of you might know that name. Some of you might not know that name. Now, I first met Rusty, actually, it would have been in a thrift store, when I actually discovered an album by Rusty Warren recorded live at the Pomp Room in Phoenix, Arizona. And so I had never heard of the Pomp Room nor Rusty. So, of course, I grabbed that album and ran to Google and found out that she had been a piano player and comedian, played across the country, and eventually in the mid-50s settled here in Phoenix, playing mainly at the Pomp Room. And she had 15 albums to her credit. Several of those albums had gone gold. And so when I was at her website, there was a little button up in the corner that said, contact me. So, of course, I did. And she was living in Hawaii. So at first we were emailing back and forth. And then we started having phone conversations. And she wound up moving to Southern California. And so there were several times I would just drive over and have lunch with her and hang out and hear her talk about stories. And one thing she was talking about with the Pomp Room is originally had been the Pump Room, but they got in trouble legally by a bar in Chicago. And so they did the cheap thing of just closing in the top of the U, thereby creating the Pomp Room. Now, her big song was called Knockers Up. I mean, her humor was very pro-female. Pam, she actually performed all over the country, in small towns and big towns. So, but she had a regular gig right here. She actually was Entertainer of the Year, I think, at least 5 times for Las Vegas. So she had quite a career. And Knockers Up was very much in line with her humor. It was very pro-female, and it was all about women. Doesn't matter whether large or small. Hoist 'em high, hoist 'em proud. And so when she would go perform, it was like she would go into these little bars, and the owners would open the curtain and see the place was filled. All these wives had come to hear Rusty, and they brought their husbands who drank. So it was a great combination, and Rusty was a huge success. She was considered to be so bawdy that she never got played on the radio. And oftentimes she said that kids would find it in the very back of their parents' record collection, so that they would never find it. But eventually they did, and get all those little naughty bits. Now, one thing I loved is that with Knockers Up, that was done the early 60s, and I was able to work with her archives and her business partner, and we went through and found the original sheet music for Knockers Up because the Library of Congress wanted it so that they could have it, and she is billed as the birth mother of the sexual revolution for that song she first recorded right here at the Pomp Room. So, I mean, when I got news that Rusty passed away, I was sad. She had a grand life. I mean, as a comedian and a musician, she changed the world. And one thing I always joke about is the fact that, we need a bust of Rusty Warren somewhere in the city to commemorate what she did for so many women across the country. And there she is. Actually, that was the last time I saw her out in Southern California before COVID hit. So she was 91. Rusty, Knockers Up. All right. So now we're ready for some fun and some answers. All right. So our first question, what year did people of African American descent first land in North America? And it was C, 1492.
And I made a point of bringing this up because a lot of people are very familiar with this 1619 project, the work that's been done by around that topic of when slaves first came to North America. And that's a very important work. But people forget that Spain and Portugal had a long relationship with Africa, Northern and Western Africa, long before this continent was discovered. So when Columbus came, and Spain and Portugal started developing interests here in this continent, they brought with them African descended people as well as African culture. So Pedro Alonso was a navigator for Columbus, but there were others who came. Some were free, some were slaves. And people forget that some of our early communities, Tucson, Los Angeles, and Mexico, a lot of them were populated with people who were both European and of African descent. So I like to remind people that people of African ancestry has been on this continent since it was first discovered by Europeans. We all know that tribal people were already here, which is why you have a lot of folks in Mexico who are actually mixed Native American and African descent, as well as European. So the African portion of our early culture is much earlier than people realize, and especially here in the Southwest.
Indeed. All right. Question 2. Who was the first person of African descent ever recorded in the Southwest? And it was D. Oh, he came in with Marcos de Niza.
Yes, he did. In fact, my understanding, and I'm not an expert in him, but my understanding is he was sent north first to do kind of the scouting around for Deniza, and apparently made it as far north as the Hopi communities, but died during this expedition somewhere down in southern New Mexico, I believe.
Oh, wow. Didn't realize that. All right. At what forts were the U.S. colored troops, better known as the Buffalo Soldiers, first stationed in Arizona? And it was C, Fort Verde and Fort Whipple.
Yeah, the Buffalo Soldiers were a peacetime military force that were established after the Civil War. They actually made up 1/5 of the peacetime military after the Civil War in the United States. And they were stationed all over the West in every state. So in Arizona, most people are familiar with them being associated with Fort Huachuca, which was actually a much later military base and on the border for a reason. Think about Pancho Villa and some of the other activities that were happening in Mexico. The Buffalo Soldiers were used, and they were sent into Mexico as well as Cuba. But early on, as the territories, Arizona and New Mexico territories were developing, Buffalo Soldiers were brought in to help keep the peace. And think about what's happening in 1885 on between Prescott and Verde Valley. You have a lot of copper mining happening, as well as you have a lot of ranchers coming in because of the railroad opening up around the Topeka or Atlanta Pacific Railroad, which was built by 1881. So these northern territories were all opening up for sheep grazing and cattle ranching. So with all these economic interests and people coming into the area, you also had a lot of other types of concerns with people clashing and other aspects. So the Buffalo Soldiers were kind of brought in to help keep the peace, at least at that time. They were also oftentimes used also to make sure that tribal people or push tribal people onto reservations and make sure they stay. So, as I said, they were used in a variety of different ways. But yes, they were first came to Arizona. My understanding is their first duty stations were at Whipple and at Fort Verde. And Fort Verde, by the way, the state park actually does a great Buffalo Soldier event in February where they've got a museum that has some great displays, and they talk about and do a whole thing around Buffalo Soldiers who are stationed there. So I absolutely recommend taking advantage of that in usually February.
Okay, and the weather's gonna be much nicer.
Yes.
Well, I know, like I'm involved with the Pioneer Cemetery where we actually met.
Yes.
And usually every Memorial Day they do an event commemorating fallen soldiers, and they would have reenactors coming in playing Buffalo Soldiers, which is always nice. And then it was great because they bring their wives and their kids all dressed in traditional period clothing as well. So I don't think that's going to happen this year. So hopefully next year we can get kind of back on to doing that.
Yeah, I noticed the Buffalo Soldiers who were buried there. I think it was both the 10th and the 9th Cavalry.
So yeah. All right. Question 4. The moniker of Buffalo Soldier is believed to have given to them by the Comanche.
Yes. And honestly, it depends on who you talk to, it's whether or not this actually happened.
That sometimes happens with history.
Yes, it is. However, I think it's a great story. The thought is because of their hair resembled that of a buffalo, which we look at the picture behind you, you can see that.
Oh, right.
They were thought to that's thought to have been the moniker that was given to them because their hair resembled to the buffalo fur. But as I said, the Buffalo Soldiers were frequently used to enforce laws and to enforce tribes being on reservations, and so they were frequently interacting with tribes, and in some cases the some of the black soldiers were tribal people themselves, such as I'm blanking on the name, but there were scouts who were themselves tribal and black. The Seminole, that's what I'm thinking of, the Seminole Indians in Texas,
Okay.
who themselves were tribal people who had left and established a community in Mexico, believe it or not, and they were invited back to North America to help patrol the border in Texas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So here we are at question 5. Which came first to Arizona, statehood or segregation? And sadly, it was segregation.
Yeah, interestingly enough, it was. And apparently, my understanding, and a researcher named Bernard Wilson at the History Museum in Tucson does a great show talk around this. But my understanding is there was a lot of Southerners who were moving to Arizona at that time. And I posted those 2 photos to show that that photo, the top one of the school in Williams, you can tell there was that's a typical school at about 1900, and that's a very much of a mixed race classes. So because you had both Black, Hispanic people here in Williams, a variety of different people of different ethnic background were living here in Williams, and those kids all went to school together. So because of the influx of the Southerners, right about that time in Arizona, they did push the law. They did push for school segregation in Arizona. A lot of states at that time were segregating schools. And in small towns like Williams, where there were a few Black students, oftentimes the students were kind of put in a couple of desks on the side of the class. But in other communities where you had a large Black community, a Black population, they actually created separate schools. So I think you've had programs on some of those schools in Phoenix.
And yeah, we actually had Carver.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the Dunbar School in Tucson, as well as the Murdoch Center, which was the Dunbar School, and Flagstaff, which had two schools as well.
Indeed. All right. Question 6. In what year did the state of Arizona desegregate school systems? And it's D, 1953.
Yep. So Arizona actually started the desegregation process prior to it being done nationally. So actually, they started a year earlier. Most people are familiar with the Brown versus Education, which was the Supreme Court case that actually desegregated schools across the country. But Arizona actually chose to do it a year earlier than that.
Very good. All right. All right. So what spurred a major migration of African American laborers out of the South to northern Arizona starting in the 20s? And it wasn't cotton.
Mm-mm. Although cotton, and those of you in Phoenix know this, cotton actually did bring in a lot of Black people in southern Phoenix. But for northern Arizona, but I believe that actually started happening more in the 40s. For northern Arizona, it was lumber, and this is really unique. I'll do a little plug. I know you're going to have Jack Reed do a presentation later, and he's really the person to talk about this. He's the one who really did the research on it. But a company called Katy Lumber Company out of Louisiana, apparently the lumber industry of the South was dying right about the 1920s, and they were desperate to try and find a new source of lumber. So this company, my understanding is they basically moved their operations to the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, where actually, when in actuality, the mill itself was on the Apache Reservation, White Mountain Apache Reservation, in an area known today as McNary. and they set up a mill there. Well, in the South, the laborers were Black in the lumber industry. And so a Southern company out of Louisiana could not imagine coming to Arizona without their normal laborers. So apparently they brought with them 500 Black employees to northern Arizona to work in that region. Well, those workers would go home to Louisiana and let their families know that there were work opportunities. And interestingly enough, and Jack can talk about this better than I, the lumber industry paid better here. So what these workers were getting paid, they're very skilled workers, what they were getting paid in Louisiana for a week, they were getting paid by the day here in Arizona. So word got out. So there was it started a diaspora of, interestingly enough, skilled lumber workers out of the South to the lumber industry areas of northern Arizona. So communities like Holbrook, Winslow, Williams, Peach Springs, there was lumber out on the reservation. Flagstaff as well had fairly substantial Black populations and lumber, people working in the lumber industry, starting in the 20s, but continuing well into the 50s. So many of those, in fact, people don't realize, like, for instance, Winslow has a chapter of the NAACP. There are still Black communities, very small. Here in Williams, we still have several Black families who came here working for the lumber industry. We actually have a Black church here in Williams. There's one in Winslow, and there's one in Holbrook. And this is all a legacy from the Black communities that were established there as part of the lumber industry.
Wow. All right. So in what year was the famous Green Book, The Negro Travel Guide, first published by Victor Green? And it's C 1936. So can you tell us a little bit about the Green Book? Maybe people haven't seen the movie or not familiar with the Green Book. What was the Green Book?
Yeah, for those, and the Green Book was one of several, but it was the first. What they were was travel guides for Black middle class. So there were Black people who were able to purchase cars and wanted places to be able to travel throughout the West. However, recognizing that this, in fact, are actually not the West, throughout the country. And later on, the guides included travel to Europe and South America and outside of the country as well. So these are the days before the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and discrimination in businesses was still legal. So these guides were developed to allow Black middle class to be able to travel to places and quote unquote try to not get into embarrassing situations. So what it would do is list places in communities that were friendly to Black business, or Black patrons. So hotels, restaurants, gas stations, and it's interesting because on Route 66, a lot of people don't know, at least through my research, I've come to find out that the Harvey houses did not discriminate. So if you were a Black traveler on Route 66 and were coming west of the Mississippi, or if you were on the railroad for that matter, you could in fact be served at a Harvey house. But yeah, so these basically offered up places that you can go. So there were several places in Phoenix that they were listed. Later on, places in Tucson, places here in Flagstaff. Flagstaff had 2 hotels that would take Black patrons, the Harvey houses, gas stations, that stuff. So that basically helped people to travel and feel secure and safe as they traveled. But the Green Book was the first, but there were others, and they were sold at gas stations. Apparently, I believe it was Conoco gas stations actually sold them and would actually serve Black patrons.
Well, it was interesting. So I guess it was 2 years ago. We had a restaurant here called Singhai that closed down, and
Okay.
they were known because I had friends. Like, when my parents were dating, that was the only place they could go in town and have dinner at a restaurant. But
Yes.
they never showed up in the green book. And so I was always wondering, well, why weren't they in the green book? And then I was listening to another podcast talking about this couple that actually traveled and made a stop at each place in the green book. And they said one of the things was because of the discrimination the Chinese community had come up against, all they
Yes.
cared about was green money. They didn't
Yes.
care about anything else. And it was like, oh, then I realized, well, they didn't have to be in the green book. It's like it was kind of already known. It's like if you went to town, go to the Chinese restaurant and you can have dinner.
Yes. Well, and a lot of times if it wasn't listed in the Green Book and you came to town, you'd find the first Black community and ask them where you could go. So that,
Right.
so that it definitely may have been word of mouth in those days. But
Yeah, I mean, especially like here
Go
we
ahead.
have the Swindle Inn. I mean, there were other Airbnbs for musicians, things like that.
Oh, yes.
So
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, so definitely word of mouth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm sure. And then also, I know even up into my lifetime, my grandmother would travel back to Arkansas and they would do an all nighter so as not to have to stop anywhere. And that also became a mode of travel. You just did not stop. You planned really well and you didn't stop until you knew you were someplace that was friendly.
Well, was just talking to some friends and they said vacation didn't start until you got to where you were going.
Mm-hmm.
And so the kids didn't realize till much later that it was because they didn't want to stop in between. They didn't want to take a change. They wanted to get to where they knew there was a safe place. And but I liked how the kids never knew that. They just said, oh, vacation doesn't start until you get there. So
yeah, I never understood why my grandmother did that until much later in life. But that's what, she would go back to see family in Arkansas every year from California. And that's how she would do it.
All right. So which of the following was not predominantly a Black community in Arizona? And they all were. Allensville,
Randolph, and Mobile. And Randolph and Mobile are more related to the cotton industry, as we brought up. But Allensville, which actually I just learned about, there was a great little podcast, and I think it's Phoenix 101.
Oh, yeah. By the folks of the Arizona Republic, yeah.
Yes, I just learned about this just about 2 weeks ago. So the timing was great. So these are Black communities, and then it's all, these are, some of them are in the vein of these are the only place that Black people could buy land and actually create communities, or associated with an industry, or in some cases there were Black communities such as Nicodemus, Allensworth in California, that you had Black people, or Blackdom in southern New Mexico, where Black people collectively gathered and created communities that would be friendly for them. And so, this was not an uncommon strategy for Black people to create their own communities. But my understanding is with Allensville, it was land that was that Black people were able to purchase. Right. And it was quite a community, and I guess it got flooded out.
And so then they all moved to another place close by called Hopeville.
Right, which I thought was really interesting and would like to know more about. But I suspect apparently there was another community which didn't last very long, somewhere down near outside of Yuma and Quartzsite area. So I think there's more of this than we realize. And if anybody knows anything more, please let me know.
Exactly. That's how we all learn. That's one of the things I love about this is you never know who's watching and who has some stories. So, indeed.
Yeah, and check out that pod, that Phoenix 101 pod. That was really good stuff.
Oh, I didn't realize they had done one because I had done some of my own research on Allenville and found out that that's when people then basically they got flooded out too many times and got tired and decided to move to Hope.
Yeah, it was. I think it just came out just like 2 weeks ago.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. You do look for that.
Yeah, no, I will definitely take a look for that because I love what they do.
Oh, it's very good.
Yeah. All right. And who was the first Black mayor of Flagstaff?
I certainly hope most people knew this. And I really want to promote Coral, mainly because Coral is the descendant of a family that came to Flagstaff for the lumber industry. And she still lives in the home that I believe her grandfather built in
Wow.
Flagstaff. So she is that legacy. She absolutely represents that legacy of the lumber industry in northern Arizona.
That's great. So, okay. So you had mentioned beforehand some of the other stuff that you're doing to kind of preserve places and things.
And around this research is really right now. I still have a day job. They expect me to do, but I've been surely trying to gather more and more information about this history and people who are doing this work, such as Bernard Wilson in Tucson, and of course you're going to have Jack Reed on. So
Right.
I'm and anybody else who's doing this type of work or has this history, trying to develop a community of people who want to share information and help to find and learn more and preserve this history, because I really think it's important to hold on to it. And people really are very
Right.
interested in learning about it right now, and we want to take advantage of that opportunity.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's important history that we document and
Yes.
start learning more about. And because again, it's like, as I talk to people, it's like several people, it's like, oh, I know this little piece of a story. And then you talk to someone else, oh, I know this piece of a story. I know
And,
ASU. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, and Anne, and thank you for you reminding me. We do have an event coming up. Thank you. I just totally fast-paced it. I wanted to plug a little bit. I've been working with the State Historic Preservation Office, and we have a webinar coming up June 23rd called "Whose History Is It Anyway?" And the webinar is around trying to encourage communities of color, professionals, historic preservationists, and historians, and communities of color to come together to help each other to preserve this type of history. So slowly but surely, we're seeing communities that are beginning to take it upon themselves, because they're beginning to recognize that they're losing their own histories, and we want to help to give them some tools and some people with knowledge and some background, and help them realize that their history is really important too, and they need to be a part of preserving it. So yeah, it's June 23rd. It's an online webinar. It's free. We're still pulling together posters and information. We'll definitely get that out. For those who are interested, keep an eye on the Arizona State Historic Preservation Office website. We're literally working on the webpage on it right now. So it'll
Okay.
be the third, and Edward Pagan, who is professor, Dr. Edward Pagan, is professor at Arizona State University, I believe, and I hope I just didn't lie. Some of you guys may be familiar with him. Arizona State University. He was on, I believe, was the PBS show History's Mysteries, I believe it was called. So he was on that, and he will be our keynote speaker, as well as other professionals and community representatives. We hope to continue this and really start focusing on some of the histories of specific communities in the future. So this is kind of the launch right here to try to get
Oh,
people
very cool.
interested.
Nice. So yeah, Jack is actually going to be on next month on the 17th. So what I can do is I will make sure that we also pitch the 23rd event, because it's
Please
just
do.
the week before. Yeah. No, happy to do that.
Yeah.
So, because indeed that is important. All right. So let me go here. So that way people want to take your name down, and I know they can find your email on the Kaibab National Forest and track you down if they have maybe more bits of the story, or maybe they have
Absolutely.
other little bits to add to it.
Please do. Please do.
So, Margaret, thank you so much for coming on and sharing part of your passion of just Arizona history.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, my pleasure. And people really loved it. I mean, they're like, hey, this was great. I mean, it's like I see some of them got like 5 out of 10, but they're kind of used to that they don't all get 10s. But the thing is then now we know more of the story. And that's
Absolutely.
always the important piece. It's more about education than what did I get right.
Absolutely.
And yes, Sarah, I will, once I get the information about the 23rd, I will post it on my site as well. So we'll try and get as many folks there as we can. So that's the goal.
Great. Please come.
Yeah. So very good, Margaret. Well, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you.
And I will talk to you soon. I just love learning about stories that you know a little bit about, but then you find out much more about the story. And that's really, for me, what this is all about, doing that exact same thing of just getting a chance to learn more about this great place we're in. And, so in case at the beginning when I asked you to share, you were like, oh, maybe tonight's going to be a dud of a show. Well, now you can see it was not a dud of a show. And so if you didn't share, now here's your chance to share it again. So that way all your friends can learn about some Arizona they might not have known. So now we're getting for show and tell. And so, I have a house full of little things. And so let's see. So this, oh, wait a minute. There's the camera. So this is a little travel pencil. This still is a little sharp pencil from, let's see if you can, the Tovray Public Stockyards. World's largest custom feedlot. And then there you have a little cow. And so I love how Anita's like, I share. I know, Anita, you share every week. So, but I just encouraging other folks to share as well. So there is indeed. So Edward Tovray really opened the stockyards in 1919. Just a few years after statehood. And at that point, the stockyards were far removed from any neighborhoods close by at all. And it was said he was running or processing more than 300,000 head of cattle every year. And if any of you have been near a cattle farm or anything, there is a certain aroma that when the wind blows the proper direction is not a place you want to hang out a lot. And sadly, that's just what started happening. Was right next door, you had Alessio Carraro, who built what is kind of what people refer to as the wedding cake castle. So, which is now referred to as Tovray Castle. He started building that in 28. Or I guess actually, it was finished in 28, like in the late 20s, and it was supposed to be much grander. But he realized that there was a problem with the wind when it blew. You got the smell from the stockyards. And so he wound up selling that castle to Tovray. And Tovray's wife, he passed away soon after buying it. Was only there for like a year, but then his wife Della actually lived in it until her passing away as well. Now, with that, the stockyards also realized that, they should open up a restaurant. And in the late 40s, they did just that, serving, of course, what they knew, beef. Because if they had so many people who were coming to buy, why not feed them as they were waiting? They redid. So this is a redo of, they had one photo of the original sign, which was a Glenn Guyette sign. I actually went with Glenn. We went with the manager of the restaurant, and he was like, yep, that was one of my signs. And so I love the fact that they have now redone that. And if you do get a chance, you actually, what they've done with Tovray Castle now is they used to put tickets for sale. They would sell out. And then for 3 months, nobody could get tours to go see tours because all those tickets were already gone. The city of Phoenix bought it in the late 2000s and did a huge restoration. And so what they've done is the tickets are on lottery. So if you go to their website, you can put your name on a list, and then what'll happen is they will do drawings and you'll get an email that says, hey, you have some tickets. And so then you can go buy those, or if you don't, they go back into the pool. And so people hopefully will finally get tickets to go see the Tovre at Carraro Heights Castle. The tickets are now open through June 30th for fall tours, which I think the way the world is going, I think fall tours will be a thing. So I'm wondering that my very self, trying to plan kind of what's coming up as well. Next week, we have Homer Teal, who is an archaeologist in Southern Arizona. He works with Desert Archaeology, Inc., and so that's going to be a fun show as well. Remember, if you have any stories, things you would like to add, or just suggestions about, hey, you should do something with this, here is your chance to be like, indeed. You can always reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or email. Happy to chat with folks. Love to hear from you. As we get ready to wrap up this episode, I always want to give a shout out to my cocktail advisor, PJ Vader Barron, for always doing great storytelling with a beverage. The intro music was my friend Chris. With the video, who did the video, my friend Cole Travis, who wrote that original music. Our outro music is by Mr. Hose Orchestratica, along with some found film footage of Arizona in the 50s. So everyone, I want to wish you all an amazing evening, and I will see you back here next Thursday, 7 o'clock, same bat time, and we'll hear from Homer, which should be a really great show as well. So thank you all so much, and good night.